Our e-mobility solution, the Fronius Wattpilot, keeps getting better and better. And today I'm going to present to you the newest features that we can implement with our Fronius Wattpilot. And they are called, of course, one hand side, the load balancing, and on the other hand side, the integration into Fronius Solar.web. I welcome you dearly today's webinar to our today's Fronius webinar about the Fronius Wattpilot and the new functionalities. My name is Michael Raunig, and as always, of course, if you have any questions during or after the webinar, please feel free to use the chat functionality, ask us these questions directly, and we are happy to answer all of them. So there were lots of talks about the ongoing features, about the ongoing functionalities. And as you know, we are constantly improving our e-mobility solution, the Fronius Wattpilot, on a constant basis. And the best for you guys as the installer and as the customer, of course, you get all these features via the over-the-air software updates. So you are always up to date with our e-mobility solution, the Fronius Wattpilot. So let's have a look on what's on the agenda today. First of all, we are going to talk about the most specific functionality, in this case, the Fronius Wattpilot integration into Fronius Solar.web. I know a lot of you guys have waited for this feature a long time. Of course, it is most important to get all the Wattpilot data online into our web portal, into Fronius Solar.web, and to gather all the information about the Wattpilot data centralized in Solar.web. So we are going to talk about that today. And furthermore, we are going to talk about the new feature. Maybe you haven't heard about it. It is our load balancing functionality. And with load balancing, we will have in the future the possibility to avoid overloads at the feeding point and to operate multiple devices in one system. Yeah, last but not least, I'm going to show you today the so-called OCPP function, the Open Charge Point Protocol function, and we will also going to implement this functionality into the Wattpilot. And if you are used to e-mobility solutions in the past, then you will know that OCPP is very important to implement the Wattpilot in different applications like public charging infrastructure, billing of the charging process, and of course, management of the charging solution itself. Yeah, and last but not least, at the end of the webinar, I'm going to show you our timeline and launch dates. So when you get these new functions, features on your Wattpilot device. Okay, so first of all, let's start with the integration into Fronius Solar.web. And of course, this integration was a long time awaited, and now we possible have this solution. So with this integration into Solar.web, you now have different possibilities on how to use the data coming from your Wattpilot device directly in Fronius Solar.web. First of all, the integration is very simple. It is like an manually adding process of the Wattpilot itself. So when you click to Fronius Solar.web, you can instantly add or remove manually a Fronius Wattpilot to each and every Fronius Solar.web system. This one I'm going to show you later on in our live demo. So we'll have a live demo of adding the Wattpilot and the different functionalities. Second on, we have the integration, of course, in the energy balance. And in the energy balance, as you know, you have all the sum up values of the different loads and of course of the producers. And therefore the Wattpilot also is implemented there. It has its own color, and therefore in the energy balance, you can see all the summed up values for the daily values, monthly values, yearly values. So all the total values that you get from the Wattpilot are then implemented in the energy balance. And I think this is especially good for end customers, a very good feature here that we have to visualize the energy flows of the Wattpilot and to know what energy is going into the electric vehicle. Yeah, then of course the bubble chart should not be missing, and therefore also the integration of the Wattpilot into the bubble chart is there. And therefore we have of course Wattpilots displayed separately in the consumption list. So here on the right hand side on the screenshot you can see it. We have our Wattpilot charging solutions implemented in the bubble chart, and when you click to loads to the consumption list, then you get each and every Wattpilot at the real-time value. So you see instantly how much watts are being consumed by the Wattpilot, what is the power of the Wattpilot currently, and therefore a very good tracking and display also for the end customer is then possible with that. Yeah, then third one is of course the history chart, and this is especially true when you want to track your charging processes, your charging lists. And therefore with the history chart, of course, you get detailed values. They can be visualized separately. And as you know, like with the inverters, like with the smart meters, basically like every data source that we have in Solar.web, you can choose the corresponding channel. So there are different channels, and therefore also for the Wattpilot, you can choose an extra channel. And with that, it is possible to get a detailed analysis of the values of the Wattpilot, and different values can be added, like the Wi-Fi signal strength, of course, currents, voltages, overall power, consumption, and therefore it is a very good feature also for you as an installer for troubleshooting on the one hand side, because you can track each and every value of the Wattpilot, and therefore when you want to do troubleshooting, please make sure to also use the history chart, track down each and every value, and therefore you get a first idea of where can the failure be, and therefore for troubleshooting, this is a very straightforward process now with Solar.web. Yeah, and last but not least, of course, as you know, Solar.web, we also have our report functionality ready. And with the report functionality, you have the possibility to, first of all, personalize your reports for the Wattpilot data. And there again, you can put out a very detailed view about the different values that we get. And for the report functionality, this is then a very straightforward process. Also for the visualization, for the building of the process, you get out each and every detail of the Wattpilot functionalities, and therefore you can send this report either to your email address or download them directly. So especially for visualization, for monitoring of the charging solution, this report functionality is very important. So let's have a closer look into the detailed values that you can get now from Solar.web. First of all, we are going to start with the energy balance. And down below, you can see the energy balance for every day and month. And furthermore, it is of course possible to view all the energy balance for the whole year and even for the whole lifetime of the system. So whenever you have your Wattpilot data ready, then you can show the day, the month, the year, and the total energy capacity. Down below, you see here now the first view. It is the daily view on the left-hand side. And there you see our Fronius Wattpilot here is in violet. And there you can see the detailed energy flows that are going into the electric vehicle. So when we take a normal day into account, we have the sun curve following the sun curve. And then we see very nicely here, the Wattpilot is a dynamically charging regulator, and therefore, of course, regulates the power dynamically. And here you see the Wattpilot follows perfectly the sun curve. With our single to three phase switching, we can see here now that the sun curve can be directly followed, and therefore only PV surplus energy is integrated into the electric vehicle, and therefore you can make sure that each and every amp that is going down from the PV system can be charged into your electric vehicle to make sure that you get a very good surplus energy to your electric vehicle and that you get very good own consumption rates. So more or less, you can compare it a little bit to our heat solution, the Fronius Untitled. It's doing the same basically on another technical basis, but overall you can see that for own consumption, these processes are very efficient. Yeah, and then on the right-hand side, you see that for the monthly views. So here you can see, of course, again in violet, you can see the energy is going down to the electric vehicle. And of course, for the end customer, I think this is a very nice feature that he has a good overview what his electric car is consuming, how much energy is being put in the electric vehicle, and therefore he gets a good overview about the daily consumption, the monthly consumption, and of course also the yearly consumption. So if the next time a customer is asking you, how much is my electric vehicle consuming over the year, then you can easily answer that question with the use of Fronius Solar.web. Okay, second up, we then have the analysis functionality in the history chart. And as I told you before, we have now different channels that we can use. And therefore, we have a very detailed view on the Wattpilot device itself. First of all, we have, of course, the voltage per phase, the current per phase. So each and every phase can be visualized separately. I think this is a very nice feature when you're doing the troubleshooting and you want to know if all three phases are working correctly, then you can check the voltage and the current per phase. Furthermore, of course, you can track the power factor, so cosinus phi of the charging process. This is also very interesting for different vehicles. So since each and every vehicle has its own onboard charger built in, of course, depending on the firmware and the used hardware of the electric vehicle, the cosinus phi, so the power factor, differentiates. And therefore, when you're interested in electric vehicle data, I think this is a very nice way to track it. How efficient is your electric vehicle charging on the AC side? And with this power factor, you can determine if an electric vehicle is more efficient on AC charging or less efficient on AC charging. And therefore, with the power factor, you can easily track that. Yeah, then we have, of course, the device performance. So you can see how your device is performing, as well as the Wi-Fi signal strength. And I know this is a lot of topic, especially when you're installing the Wattpilot in the garage or at the carport, then you want to know how good is the signal coming to the Wattpilot. Maybe you need a stronger signal, maybe a power line adapter for adding up more Wi-Fi signal strength. And now with these detailed values, you can instantly show from afar even how strong is the Wi-Fi signal, and maybe you want to add up some signal strength. Yeah, you can all show that, of course, in the analysis function. And as you see on the screenshot on the right-hand side, we can track each and every value separately. So no problem here when you go into detail with the data analysis, and especially for troubleshooting, this is a straightforward process here. Yeah, some important hints about the Wattpilot integration now that I have for you. First of all, and this is a very important step, when you first add a Wattpilot into an existing Solar.web system, please make sure that all devices are online and up to date. So first of all, when you start the process, please make sure that both inverter and Wattpilot are online in the same network. And therefore, you can make sure that you can take an update, first of all, on the inverter, and second also on the Wattpilot. So please make sure that you get the latest firmware version for the Wattpilot and also for the Solar Wattpilot app. So for the mobile app, please make sure that these are up to date. Yeah, then Wattpilot and coupled inverter, they must be in the same Solar.web system. I know this is somehow clear, but nevertheless, please make sure that when you couple an inverter with a Wattpilot, they are in the same Solar.web system on Fronius Solar.web to make sure that the data is correlating correctly. Otherwise, when you are adding a different Solar.web system, of course, this means differentiation in the values, and therefore we want to make sure that Wattpilot and inverter are in the same Solar.web system. Yeah, then, a little downside to say, a little hint that you need to take into account and need to think back of is that the Wattpilot doesn't store data actively without the internet connection. So maybe you know the feature of the snap inverter and also Gen24 Plus inverters. When the internet connection is lost, then the inverter stores the data locally on the device. However, this is not the case with the Wattpilot. So when the Wattpilot loses internet connection, there is no data stored locally on the device. So please make sure, whenever you want to make sure that you get the data from the Wattpilot, that it always stays online so that it can forward the data to the server and that we get a good data connection to the internet. Yeah, then of course, and this is a little downside for the older systems, the data will not be subsequently added to Solar.web. So when you have older systems, the data are only tracked, so to say, from the time when you bring it online into the Solar.web system. So historical data is not stored in this case, but from the day you bring it online into Solar.web, then you have all the data, and as long as the Wattpilot is online, you will get the data online in Solar.web. Yeah, talking about the different firmware versions, I hope you all brought your firmware versions to the newest state. So current firmware version for now is 36.3. And please make sure that the Wattpilot firmware version is at the minimum of 36.0 to make sure that there is a good connection to Solar.web. However, when you are doing now a firmware update for the Wattpilot, you are instantly on 36.3, and then you have no problem with it. Same goes for Gen24 and Tauro firmware devices. Please make sure that there is a minimum firmware of 1.12. This is very important that the Wattpilot can add it to the Solar.web system. Yeah, and last but not least, each and every Wattpilot can be only in one system at a time. This is especially true for family households who have a second household, for example. Let's imagine one customer has a main household and, for example, a holiday household. So please make sure each and every Wattpilot device can be only in one Solar.web system at the time. So whenever you want to change the Solar.web system with the correlating Wattpilot, please make sure to delete the Wattpilot from the first system and then manually add it into a second system. So then you can use the Wattpilot in different Solar.web systems, no problem, but please keep in mind a Wattpilot can be only in one system at the time. Okay, and enough for the theoretical part. Now I want to show you a little demo here directly in our Solar.web system and how to add the Wattpilot into Solar.web. So as you can see here, we are directly in the overview of the Wattpilot system where we want to add now to the Solar.web, where we want to add the Wattpilot to the Solar.web system. So all you need to do basically is to go to the settings here. We have here our landings page. And when we click now here to settings, you find the second source, you find it here under components. And the adding process is pretty much the same as you would know with every data source. So whenever you have added a Gen24 Plus, or for example, a data manager to a system, then you know how to do it with the Wattpilot. All you need to do here, you have, of course, your data list. And all you need to do is to go to new device and click on add. And then under data source type, you can just select our new Wattpilot. There you see Data Manager and Gen24 Tauro are always available for adding data sources. And now we want to add manually a Wattpilot. All you need to do then is to search the serial number of the device. You find the serial number, of course, on the back of the device, and you find it also on the RFID reset card. So please make sure to also store the reset card. Please don't throw it away, because there you can find the ID of the Wattpilot. And of course, also very important for adding is the V code. And when you add up these two values, so serial number and V code, you can find it on the back of the device or on the reset card. Then you just click on OK, and then the Wattpilot is being added to your Solar.web system. Then down below, you see a value here. It is called Wattpilot. And then you can see the two Wattpilot devices that are added here into the system. And of course, you are free to go and add as many Wattpilots to your Solar.web system as you want. So there is basically no limit. If you have multiple devices like we have it here, two devices at once, then you can add them. You see the serial number. You also see the type of the device. So Wattpilot Go 11J, for example. And then you can also see the data source ID, which it is coupled to. So this is in this case a Gen24 Plus with a pilot device. And there you see it has a coupling, and also the device is online. So you see that it is up to date, that it is online, and that it delivers data to Fronius Solar.web. Okay, another thing that I want to show you here is, of course, now our report functionality. And here in the basic implementations, you can see here the reports. And when you click to reports, then you can always generate a new report. So you just click to generate new report, and then you can see here the point custom. And of course, this is one big benefit of our Solar.web Premium functionality. With Solar.web Premium, you can now download very, very comfortable custom reports. And then you can, for example, choose daily sum or detailed values. And under detailed values, you can find each and every value of the Wattpilot itself, and can make sure that you find very detailed values that you can use for the report functionality. Yeah, then of course you can choose for the generation type either automatically or on a manual basis. So let's call it like a manual basis. And then we will get the intervals, for example, monthly, weekly, or daily. And then it is loading the available channels. And then we can make sure to add up the different values that we get from Solar.web. So for example, we can get the Wi-Fi signal strength, we can get the currents per each and every phase. And of course, we can make also the overall power and overall energy that is coming from the Wattpilot. So when you have chosen your values, you can just click on OK and generate the report manually. And then down below here on the Wattpilot basis, you can find the configured current, current state for each and every phase, energy of the power of the Wattpilot, power factor, the type 2 sensor, so in this case the status of the type 2 cable, as well as the Wi-Fi signal strength. Okay, last but not least, in the overview, you can see then, of course, the detailed value for each and every Wattpilot. So when you click here on the consumption, for example, then you can see each and every Wattpilot in the current power state. And then you can see when the Wattpilot is charging, the current power state of the device, and you can see the current state and overall overviews. Okay, so much for the little demo, and I hope this was a quite good overview about the Fronius Solar.web integration. And the next point and second part for today, I want to present to you our new feature, our new possibility, and it is called the Wattpilot load balancing functionality. So first of all, what is load balancing and how you can achieve it? Maybe you had already in the past some customers who want to install multiple Wattpilots in one household, in one system. Of course, then it gets to the point where you say you have a maximum available current in the household. So let's call in our example on the right-hand side here, we have a maximum available current of 20 amps, for example. And then, of course, you want to make sure that the Wattpilots in the system are not overcharging the feeding point, so that there is no overpower at the feeding point and that you can work with the available power. Therefore, it is very important to divide the power, the current that you have available to each and every device to make sure that there is no overcharging at the feeding point. Yeah, and with our load balancing function, it is now possible to implement up to 3 Wattpilots in each and every system. And therefore, you can make sure that these 3 Wattpilots are communicating to each other to make sure that there is no overcharge, no overload at the feeding point. Yeah, then of course, each and every Wattpilot must be paired with the same inverter. So when you have a system with a PV inverter, please make sure when commissioning the new Wattpilot that it is paired and coupled with the same inverter, that it has one data source, very important. Second on, the Fronius smart meter in that system. Of course, the Fronius smart meter again tracks the energy flows and therefore also watches the feeding point. And therefore, the Fronius smart meter must be at the feeding point. So please be very careful for all of you who are installing smart meters on a regular basis in the consumption path. Please make sure that it is not integrated in the load path, not in the consumption path, and therefore you need to install this Fronius smart meter in the feeding point. Yeah, and then we also have solutions for single phase and two phase cars. And as you know, when you're charging a car on only single phase or maybe on two phase, you sometimes get a problem with a misleaded phases. And therefore, with our load balancing, you can also care for that. So we have a solution for single phase and two phase cars to make sure that the phases are operated synchronously and therefore there is no mismatching between the phases. Yeah, overall, our load balancing function now is a cloud solution. So the load balancing is controlled via the server, via the cloud. And therefore, when there is an internet failure, if there is an internet breakdown, then we have, of course, a fallback mode, and then you can define this fallback mode manually to make sure that there is no overload on the feeding point, even if the load balancing function is down. So I have talked about 3 Wattpilot devices in one system, but attention, please take care, the PV optimization, so that the Wattpilot is following our PV sun curve. Please make sure that the PV optimization still is available on only one device. So it is possible, however, to do the load balancing up to 3 devices. So you can set up, for example, a charging current, a fixed charging current, and then the Wattpilots are talking to each other, communicating to each other that there is no overload at the feeding point. However, the PV optimization on the Wattpilot is still available on one device. However, as you know, you can operate the PV optimization after each other. So for example, when you have 3 Wattpilot devices, you can charge Wattpilot number 1 with PV surplus energy, and then you can switch to the second Wattpilot manually. So end the charging process of Wattpilot 1 and then start the charging process on Wattpilot 2. Of course, this is possible. You can do it manually, but please take care For the load balancing function, this is only true to protect the household against overload and to use the maximum amperage of the PV system to charge your electric vehicles at the maximum power. But the PV optimization is only true for one device. Okay, so now let's have a look on how the dynamic load balancing is actually working. Let's assume in our first example, we have a household connection point of 32 amps. Of course, we have our public grid on the right-hand side, we have our utility meter, and directly after the utility meter, we have our Fronius smart meter. Fronius smart meter is now tracking, of course, the amperage flow, so the power of the overall system and the energy flows. And when we have now a household connection with 32 amps, we have, for example, a household load. This is at the moment 16 amps. And then we have one single car charging. And of course, the maximum amperage is settled down to 16 amps to not overload the household connection. So as you can see here, our load balancing is limiting the amperage on the Wattpilot to not overcharge the system. Yeah, if now a second car comes to the charging point and also wants to charge with a second Wattpilot, for example, then our load management will react correspondingly and of course make sure that the current is being lowered down to 8 amps, to divide the amperage to both devices. So charging process is possible with two cars at the half, at the minimized amperage, and therefore to make sure that the feeding point is not overloaded. Yeah, of course, if then amperage is coming down from the PV generator, if the sun rises up in the morning, for example, and you get down 8 amps from the PV generator, then of course this surplus energy, this extra amperage is detected by the Fronius smart meter and therefore can be used for charging. So in this case, the electric vehicles can be charged faster with the help of PV surplus energy. So in this case, of course, as you know, maybe also the fact faster charging with PV, of course, now comes especially true. So when you have a PV system on your roof and maybe you have a somewhat limited household connection, then you can charge faster with the help of the amperage from the PV generator. So whenever you want to, you can charge faster your electric vehicle with a higher current when you have a PV system on your roof. Yeah, when then the household loads, for example, they rise up in the morning, so we get a morning peak, the household load is rising to 10 to 20 amps, then the load balancing will again make sure that the amperage on the charging stations are lowered down to 10 amps to make sure that there is no overload at the feeding point. So as you see with this dynamically load balancing, it is made sure for each and every second that the state of the system is being constant, that there is no overcharge at the feeding point, and that the values that the current is being divided correctly to each and every load, each and every device, and that also the Fronius inverter is being taken into account for this charging process. Yeah, second up, beneath the load balancing, you can also take into account the prioritization of each and every Wattpilot system. So first of all, for the prioritization, it is good to say that you can now divide the energies, divide the current, divide the power to each and every device. So for example, first of all, the prioritization goes from low, medium, and high. So for each and every Wattpilot device, you can take the order of priorities from low to high. So for example, if you have one Wattpilot, this is most important because you know you have one weekly car you need to get to work every day, then you can set the priority on this device, for example, to high. You can see it in the picture down below here. So our first priority is high. We have 3 cars connected to 3 Wattpilots. We have the connection point of 32 amps. And then our first priority gets the maximum amperage, the maximum power. So in this case, we get 32 amps delivered to the first car because it has the highest priority. Yeah, on the second thing, when this car is now leaving, then the amperage can be divided to the low priorities. So in this case, we have the same priority here, priority low, and therefore the maximum amperage, the 32 amps, are being divided into 16 amps, and both cars, they get power, they can charge at the even priority, they have the same priority. And when the last car is leaving, for example, then the last car, also the low priority, gets the maximum power to being charged very fast. So this is the basic priority setting. And on the other hand side, you can also prioritize after charging modes. So as you know, for PV surplus charging, we have our eco mode, our next trip mode, and of course the standard mode for just charging the car. And depending on the charging mode where the Wattpilot is in, that is also a prioritization. So to say, for our eco mode, this has the lowest prioritization because eco mode somehow is optional charging, because for eco mode, you also want to make sure that only PV surplus energy is being fed into the electric vehicle. Second prioritization is then the next trip mode, and the highest priority is then standard mode. So a Wattpilot in standard mode will always have priority over next trip mode and eco mode. So as eco mode is only used for PV surplus energy, then of course, please make sure that only cars are being charged in eco mode that can be optionally, because in eco mode, there is no guarantee that you get energy. So therefore, when you want to make sure that a car is charged, then use just the standard mode, use a high priority, and then you get current at first. So with these two possibilities, you have the possibility to prioritize your charging process and to make sure that you have a very detailed prioritization between the electric vehicles, between the charging stations, and therefore you can get very detailed systems and very personalized systems, even with these two prioritization modes. Yeah, so much about the load balancing function. And second up, I want to show you today our OCPP integration, our Open Charge Point Protocol integration. Maybe some of you already heard of the OCPP, some of you don't. So basically, Open Charge Point Protocol is now a standardized protocol in the industry to make sure that there is a communication between the charging station and the back end. So this is used whenever you need a standard software interface for communicating with a backend service provider to make sure that the charging process is being managed or controlled externally, or there is a billing for public or semi-public charging stations. So as you know, Open Charge Point Protocol is then the basis to make sure that the Wattpilot can be used for such applications like public charging, billing of the charging process, and of course, very important, management, energy management, and load management of the charging process. So therefore, let's assume the first example so that you get some hint for the OCPP and where it is used to. We have here our example. So let's assume you want to charge on a public place, so public charging. Then you come as a customer, you come with your car to the charging station and you find there the Wattpilot variant Go Home, that doesn't matter, with the Open Charge Point Protocol 1.6. Yeah, then we have, of course, our RFID card. For example, the grid provider, the charge point operator delivers an RFID card to the customer. And with that RFID card, it is possible to do the authentication on the charge point itself. So therefore, the charge point operator, for example, a hotel, a restaurant, or even a utility grid is then the charge point operator, so the operator of the charge point itself. Yeah, with that, then there is the possibility with Open Charge Point Protocol to communicate over the internet to a so-called backend solution. And the backend solution is then provided by the so-called EMSP, the e-mobility service provider. And that can, for example, has to be, this is a very big service provider in Europe. This can be one solution for billing the charging process. So as you see, the charge point is then forwarding the data of the charging process to the e-mobility service provider. And the e-mobility service provider is then billing the charging process to the vehicle user, to the end customer. So there is an invoice taken to the end customer, and therefore you can bill the whole charging process. Very important for Open Charge Point Protocol for the communication is then, of course, that the detailed values, so for example, time, energy, and date of the charging process are being forwarded to the backend, to the e-mobility service provider, that a billing is possible. On the other hand side, Open Charge Point Protocol can be also used to control and manage the charge point itself. And this is also very important tested with our Fronius email. Maybe you have heard already about our Fronius email solution. And Fronius email is then being, of course, the the basis for all provided services with Fronius email. So Fronius email is now a software solution, a load management solution, where you can make sure that several charge points can be operated at once and that you have full control over commercial charging solutions. So the basis for Fronius email is then, of course, Open Charge Point Protocol, because with OCPP, it is now made sure that Fronius email and other backend solutions can talk to the charge point itself and can build up a communication to the charging infrastructure. So as you see, OCPP is very important. And of course, please make sure that each and every operator is tested individually. So if you have a backend solution provider in your country, please make sure that also for the Wattpilot, each and every operator is tested individually to make sure that there is good contact to the Wattpilot itself. Yeah, and not only that, but in other countries, OCPP is also the basis for different government grants. So in most countries, like in Austria, the OCPP functionality is the basis requirement for the government grant. So for example, in Austria, we have the charge point funding for companies, and the government grant says that you need to have OCPP built in the charging station, into the charging solution, that you are being granted the government grant. And I think also in different countries, this is often the case, that this standard communication protocol is important to get a government grant for the charging system. So as you see, OCPP is very important for our solution. And of course, it is also important for us that you get the possibility with the Wattpilot to implement OCPP in the future. So now I have talked to you about the different possibilities, about the new functionalities. And of course, you are now asking, when is this stuff coming live? When can I use the different functionalities? And therefore, for the last part for today, we are going to talk about the timeline and the launch dates. First of all, let's start with the integration into Fronius Solar.web. And I have good news for you. Solar.web is already launched. It is already available for the Wattpilot. Maybe you haven't noticed, but for now, you can try it out yourself. So Wattpilot is already integrated in Solar.web. And as I showed you with the adding process from now on with the correlating firmware, please don't forget the firmware update. You can instantly add a Fronius Wattpilot into Solar.web instantly. So no problem, try it out yourself. Go to your Solar.web account and try to add your existing Wattpilot there. Of course, this is also a good functionality for end customers. Please also take these values into account when talking to a customer, when argumentating the solution. Of course, now with Solar.web, you can easily put in the new values into Fronius Solar.web directly. Yeah, then second up, our load balancing function that we talked about. So to prevent overcharge at the feeding point and integrate up to 3 Wattpilot devices, load balancing will be released in Q3 2022. So as you see, not long from now, we will start with our load balancing functionality. Yeah, and last but not least, Open Charge Point Protocol 1.6 is coming at the end of the year, so Q4 2022. Then we will implement the Open Charge Point Protocol. One of the best news, however, and this is very important for our existing customers, all the features we have talked today, they will be also existing for existing device. So all the features like Solar.web integration, load balancing, and of course, Open Charge Point Protocol, they are only one firmware update away. So whenever you want to use these new functionalities, please make sure only update your Fronius Wattpilot. It is possible over the air, so no need to do anything. Just open your Solar Wattpilot app, do the firmware update, and then you will get all these new functionalities. So as you see, we are optimizing our charging solution over and over again. It keeps getting better each and every day, and therefore make sure that also existing devices get the new functionalities. So no need to buy a new charging solution. With the Wattpilot, you are up to date always and ever. So please make sure you are only one firmware update away from the new functionalities, and all the functions that are being there in the future, there are more to come, of course. They are also there with just a firmware update. So for further information and help, you can always visit our Fronius homepage, of course, and we have an extra link for the Wattpilot itself. So please make sure when you are new to the Wattpilot to also check out our basic informations and Wattpilot app informations about www.fronius.com/wattpilot-guide. And there you can find the idle charging solution with and without PV. Of course, it is the Fronius Wattpilot. So when you are interested in more detailed view about the single and three-phase charging, about the PV surplus energy, please make sure to check out our Wattpilot guide homepage here. And there you find all the YouTube videos about the Wattpilot. For now, there are several Wattpilot videos, of course, about the different functionality, maybe also external producer integration. Of course, we can also use the Wattpilot with third-party inverters. So when you're interested in this information, please check out our videos on our YouTube channel and the other webinars as well. As you want to get more information, more detailed information, please make sure we also have now our trainings facility open in Wels in Austria. So whenever you are motivated for training directly at our site, please make sure to check out our trainings and webinars. You can register on our homepage. And when you want to get a detailed training about our products, storage solutions, inverters, Wattpilot, e-mobility, then please make sure that we get also our trainings on our homepage. Yeah, last but not least, I want to show you our new application guide. And there were lots of questions about how to do the energy management with the Fronius Wattpilot. So therefore, we have now a new application guide. And if you have ever questions about the new Wattpilot function, about the new Wattpilot functionality with energy management, then of course you can use the Fronius Wattpilot application guide, energy management with the Fronius Wattpilot. You can instantly find that on our homepage. So when you just go to the download section, to the download section of the Fronius homepage, then you can find the application guide there. Okay, guys, I hope I could give you a small overview about the newest functionalities, about the newest functions of our Fronius Wattpilot. Please also make sure stay up to date. Keep up to date with our newsletters and trainings, because there are more features coming to the Fronius Wattpilot also next year, of course. So whenever you want to get more information about it, please make sure to stay up to date here at Fronius. Okay, so I will now stay online for your questions. If you have any questions during the webinar, please make sure that you use our chat functionality. I'm happy to answer these questions directly into the chat. And therefore, I want to thank you for your participation today. Hope to see you in one of our next webinars, one of our next trainings. And until then, I say stay healthy and keep charging. See you the next time here at Fronius. Bye-bye.